The market was alive with noise. Alien traders shouted, buyers bargained, and the smell of smoke and dust filled the air. In the middle of it all, under the burning twin suns, stood a small figure in chains. She was an alien girl, thin and weak. Her skin, once soft and glowing, was now pale and bruised. The iron collar around her neck was heavy, and the shackles on her wrists cut deep into her skin. She lowered her head, afraid to look at the crowd. For to them she was not a child, not a person, only property. The traders laughed as they pulled her forward. "Look here," one shouted. "A slave, weak but still useful. Buy her cheap. She will work or die trying." The crowd chuckled. Some looked at her with cruel eyes, others with boredom, none with kindness. The girl trembled. She had learned not to speak, not to cry, not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope only led to more pain. But then, through the smoke and noise, another figure walked into the market, a human. He was older, his hair touched with gray, his clothes simple but worn from travel. He moved differently from the others. He did not hurry, he did not laugh. He did not treat the market as entertainment. His eyes were sharp, watching, searching. When the trader yanked the chain and forced the girl to raise her head, her gaze met his. For a moment time stopped. She saw no cruelty in his eyes, no hunger, no greed. His look was calm, steady, almost gentle. The girl quickly lowered her eyes again, thinking it was a trick. Humans were rare in this part of space, and she had never seen one before. She thought maybe he was just another master, another buyer. The auction began. The traders shouted prices. Other buyers mocked her weakness. Some suggested throwing her away, but the human did not laugh. He stepped forward, his voice was low, firm. "I will take her." The market went silent. All eyes turned to him. Some laughed louder. "A human wants the slave girl," they jeered. "What will you do with her? She is broken. She is nothing." The human ignored their laughter. He placed something on the trader's table, an old piece of human technology, cracked but still valuable. The trader stared, shocked. He could sell that piece for far more than the girl. With a greedy grin, he agreed. The deal was done. The chains were unlocked. The girl stumbled forward, weak and confused. She waited for the command, for the slap, for the cruel voice that always followed freedom from one chain into another. Instead, the human knelt down. His hands were steady as he touched her wrists, gently rubbing where the shackles had cut her skin. He looked into her eyes and said only 2 words. Words she had never heard before. "You're free." The girl froze. Her heart raced. She didn't understand. No master said that. No buyer meant that. She thought it was a trick. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Free?" The human nodded once. His eyes carried no lies, no cruelty, only a quiet sadness. The crowd laughed again. "Foolish human," someone shouted. "She will run. She will betray you. She is only a slave." Another called, "Give her back before she steals your food." The human rose to his feet and ignored them all. He placed his coat around the girl's shoulders, protecting her from the cold wind. Then he led her away from the market, step by step, never pulling, only walking beside her, every sound in. The market faded behind them, but inside the girl's chest the noise was louder than ever. Fear pounded in her heart. What did he want from her? Why did he buy her? Was this some cruel game? She kept waiting for the moment he would show his true face, for her life had taught her one lesson. No one was kind for free, yet still. She walked. Every step away from the chains felt like walking into a dream. Her hands touched the coat he had given her, soft and warm. She glanced at him once more. His face was calm, his eyes watching the path ahead. Not her body, not her weakness. It was strange, frightening, and confusing. The girl did not know it yet, but her life had changed. In that market, she was no longer just a slave in chains. The path before her was unknown, filled with both danger and hope. But one thing was certain: the human who bought her was not like the others. And as the sun set behind the alien hills, the small girl, in torn clothes, and the lonely human traveler disappeared into the distance, leaving behind laughter, chains, and a cruel world that would never expect what came next. The desert road stretched far and empty. The girl walked beside the human, her small feet dragging in the dust. The collar was gone, the shackles removed, but in her mind, the chains were still there. Every sound made her flinch, every step felt heavy. She had known only orders, punishments, and fear. Now she did not know what to expect. The human walked quietly. His steps were steady. His eyes scanned the horizon. His face showed no anger, no greed. He was different from anyone she had ever seen. Still, the girl did not trust him. She kept waiting for the moment he would show his true face, for in her heart she believed no one freed a slave without wanting something in return. They stopped by a small stream. The human filled a cup with water and handed it to her. She hesitated, staring at it. Her mind screamed, this was a trick. Poison, maybe, or a test. He said nothing, only held it out until her shaking hands took it. She drank quickly, the cold water running down her throat. Her body shivered with relief. He gave her food next, a small piece of bread, hard and plain. But to her, it tasted better than anything she had eaten before. She devoured it, her eyes never leaving his face. When she finished, she waited for him, to strike her, to call her an animal for eating too fast. But he only nodded and said softly, eat slowly next time. You will have more. The girl stared. Her chest tightened. She wanted to believe him, but fear held her heart in its grip. Why was he being kind? What did he want? As the night fell, the human built a fire. The girl sat across from him, hugging her knees to her chest. The flames lit her face, showing her scars and thin frame. The human watched quietly but did not ask questions. He did not press her to speak. Instead, he took off his coat and placed it on her shoulders again. The warmth made her eyes sting with tears. She quickly hid her face, not wanting him to see her weakness. Hours passed in silence. Only the crackling of fire and the soft rustle of night wind filled the air. Finally, the girl whispered, her voice trembling, Why did you buy me? The human looked at her. His eyes were calm but filled with weight. Because you are not a thing to be sold, he said. His voice was low, steady. You are a child. Her lips trembled. A child. The word felt strange, foreign. She had been called many names before, slave, worthless, trash, but never child, she whispered again. But what will you do with me? He stared at the fire for a long moment before answering. Nothing you do not want, he said. I will take you away from this place. You can choose your own life. No one will own you again. The girl shook her head. Fear filled her eyes. That is not possible, she said. They will find me. They always find us. No one escapes. The human's jaw tightened. His eyes grew hard. Then let them try, he said. His voice carried quiet steel. For the first time she felt that maybe his words were not empty. Still she did not believe. She curled up on the ground, too tired to fight the thoughts in her head. Sleep came, heavy and broken. In her dreams, she heard chains rattling, voices mocking her, hands dragging her back. She woke with a scream, her body trembling, her eyes wide with terror. The human was beside her in an instant, his hand steady on her shoulder. You are safe, he said, firmly. They cannot touch you here. His voice was strong enough to quiet her racing heart. Slowly, her breathing calmed. As dawn painted the sky with pale colors, the girl sat in silence. She thought about the human's words. She wanted to believe, but trust was dangerous. Still, something deep inside her, small, fragile, almost dead, began to stir. When they started walking again. The road ahead seemed endless. The human led with calm steps. The girl followed, confused, afraid, but also strangely curious. She wondered if his promise was real, if freedom was something she could touch. That night, as the stars filled the sky, the girl watched the human from across the fire. He sat quietly repairing a piece of old gear, his face tired but focused. There was no cruelty in him, no sign of hidden tricks. For the first time, she thought of a question she had never dared ask anyone before. It was small, whispered only to herself, but it burned inside her heart. What if he truly means it? She closed her eyes, clutching the coat around her. The fire crackled. The night was calm, and though fear still lived inside her, another feeling began to grow. Hope, fragile and dangerous, yet alive. The human had made his choice. He had freed her, given her food, water, warmth, and words she had never heard before. He had not called her property, he had called her a child. And though she did not yet trust him, though the chains in her mind were still heavy, she could not deny one truth. Something was different now. Her life was no longer what it had been yesterday. The path ahead was still filled with danger, but for the first time in her broken life, she did not walk it alone. The next morning was cold. A soft mist floated above the ground, covering the path ahead like a silent warning. The girl woke before the human. She didn't move, only stared at him quietly, watching how he slept with his arms folded across his chest, not holding a weapon, not tying her down. She looked at her bare wrists again. The scars were still there, but the chains were gone. A strange feeling filled her chest. It wasn't fear this time. It was something unfamiliar, something that made her chest tight and her eyes hot. He stirred and sat up. His eyes met hers, and for a moment they just looked at each other in silence. Then he gave a small nod, not like a master, but like someone greeting an equal. "We'll travel today," he said softly. "There's a safe place 2 days away." The girl didn't answer. She only nodded, her voice still struggled to come out. Too many years had passed with no one listening to her. She had learned to be silent. They packed what little they had. The human gave her a small bag to carry, not too heavy, just enough to let her feel useful. That small act mattered. No one had ever trusted her with anything, not even a piece of cloth. They walked side by side, the sun rising above them. The desert around them was wide and empty, but not silent. Wind whispered across the sand, carrying memories. The girl glanced at the human again. She still didn't know his name, and he hadn't asked for hers. Maybe he understood she didn't have one, or maybe he knew names had power. Suddenly she spoke, her voice low and dry. "Why are you doing this?" He looked ahead for a long moment before answering. "Because someone should have done it long ago," he said. "Because no child should grow up believing she's only useful when chained." She looked down. His words scratched something deep inside her, something buried under years of pain. They reached a hilltop and paused. From there, the girl saw a small camp far below. She froze, panic flashing in her eyes. The human noticed. "It's just travelers," he said. "Merchants heading west. They won't hurt you." But her legs refused to move, her breath quickened. The fear returned like a wave. He didn't push her. Instead, he sat on a rock and waited. "You don't have to go near them," he said. "We can rest here and take the long path around." She stared at him, confused. No one had ever changed plans for her. No one had ever asked what she needed. Finally, she sat beside him. Not too close, but not far either. They shared a piece of dried fruit. It was tough and sour, but to the girl it tasted like kindness. The human spoke again, slowly, like he was sharing something heavy. "I once saw a child like you," he said. "Long ago she had chains too, but no one stopped to help her. I still remember her face. I still regret walking away." The girl didn't speak, but her heart beat faster. Maybe I can't fix everything, he said, but I can choose not to turn away again. They sat in silence as the wind blew across the rocks, carrying dust and memory. Later, when they started walking again, the girl stayed closer to him, not because she had to, but because it felt safer. As they walked, she noticed small things. How he shared water without waiting. How he warned her about sharp stones. How he looked at the sky before setting up camp, not out of fear but with care. At night she lay near the fire watching the stars. She had never really looked at them before. In the cages where she lived, there were no windows, only cold steel and silence. She whispered to the sky, not even sure why. Do stars see slaves? The human heard her, but he didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, Stars see everything, they just wait for us to notice them back. The words made her chest ache. That night she had another dream. This one was different. She dreamed of running. No chains, no shouting, just running across grass and sunlight. There was laughter too, but it was hers, not someone else's. She woke up with tears in her eyes. She didn't tell him, but he noticed and said nothing. As they walked the next day, the landscape began to change. The sand turned to dry grass. The mountains in the distance grew taller. The girl walked a little straighter now, still quiet, still cautious, but something inside her was beginning to shift. She no longer stared at her feet all the time. Sometimes she looked ahead, toward the path, toward the future, and though the journey was still long, she felt, for the first time, that maybe she had a reason to keep walking. Not just because he told her to, but because she wanted to. The morning air was cooler now. The ground had changed from dry sand to cracked stone, and the trees, though small and scattered, gave little bits of shade. The girl walked in silence, her small feet wrapped in strips of old cloth the human had given her. They had been walking for days, sleeping under stars, eating small meals by the fire, and yet the girl had not asked his name, nor had she told him hers. Truth was, she didn't have one. Slaves weren't given names. They were given numbers, orders, and pain. The human had stopped asking questions. He seemed to understand that silence was her shield. But he still watched her, not with control, but with concern. Every time she stumbled, he offered a hand. Every time she winced, he slowed down. By midday, they reached a small cliff where a stream flowed below, clear and cold. The human found a spot to rest and motioned for her to sit. She obeyed, her body tired, her mind heavier. While he filled a bottle with water, she sat still, eyes focused on the stream. She remembered something, a moment from long ago, when she was very small and someone had held her hand near water. That hand was gone now. Her family was gone too. Taken, sold, broken. The human returned and handed her the bottle. She drank quietly, but her hands trembled. He noticed. He always noticed. You're still scared, he said softly, not judging her, just saying it out loud. She nodded. Her voice was trapped behind her ribs. You don't have to be, he added. Not around me. She looked up at him then. Her lip trembled, but she held the tears inside. They used to say that too, she whispered. Right before hurting me. The human didn't speak for a while. His face grew hard, not at her words, but at the memories behind them. I'm not like them, he said, and I never will be. She wanted to believe him, but something in her heart was still chained. Her body was free, but her soul was still locked up tight. After they finished eating, the human sat near the fire and reached into his bag. He pulled out a small medical kit, nothing fancy, just bandages, salve, and water. May I? He asked, motioning toward her arm. The girl hesitated. Her old wounds had been left alone for so long they felt like part of her skin. Slowly, she nodded. He opened the salve and gently touched the cuts on her wrists. His hands were rough but careful, She winced a little, but he didn't stop. "You were punished a lot," he said quietly. "For nothing, I guess." She nodded again. "For breathing wrong. For not smiling. For crying," she whispered. His hands paused for a second. "Crying?" She nodded again. They didn't like the sound. He took a deep breath and continued. His fingers moved with patience, like someone fixing something broken, not just on the outside, but inside too. She watched his face. How serious it was. Not angry at her, but at the ones who hurt her. When he finished, he placed the bandages gently and backed away, not crowding her. "Thank you," she said, her voice small. He looked surprised, not because she spoke, but because she thanked him, as if he didn't expect anything from her at all. "You don't have to thank me," he said, "but I appreciate it." That night the stars returned, and so did her dreams. This time they weren't of running. They were of fire, cages, and screams. She woke with tears on her face, her breath caught in her throat. The human was already awake, sitting beside the fire. He didn't ask what she dreamed. Instead, he placed a warm cloth in her hands and said, "It's okay to cry." She wiped her eyes but said nothing. She sat beside him and stared into the flames. After a long silence, she whispered, "I don't know who I am without chains." He turned his head. His eyes were soft but steady. "Then let's find out together," he said. She looked at him, unsure how to respond. Her heart ached, not from fear this time, but from something else. Something gentler. The next day, when they walked again, the girl asked, "What's your name?" He smiled a little. "Thomas," he said. "Just Thomas." She nodded slowly, letting the name settle in her mind. He waited, then asked softly, "What should I call you?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I was just called Girl, or Unit 23. "Then we'll choose one later," he said, "when you're ready." For the first time in her life, she felt like she had a choice. They walked into the fading sunlight, the wind blowing behind them, and though the road ahead was still long and uncertain, she was no longer just a broken child. She was something else now, something slowly being rebuilt, not just with bandages and food, but with patience, kindness, and the strange feeling that maybe, just maybe, she mattered. They reached the human colony by sunset. It was a small outpost on the edge of a rocky hill, surrounded by metal walls and quiet watchtowers. Not many people lived there, just a few families, traders, and repairmen. It was far from the busy cities of the galaxy, but it had safety. The girl stopped walking as the gate came into view. Her heart started pounding again. She had seen places like this before. Some called themselves safe, but they always treated her like a thing. Thomas saw her hesitate. He didn't pull her forward. He only stood beside her. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly. "They know me here. They will listen." She looked at the gate, then back at him. "But what if they see me as just a slave?" she asked. Her voice trembled. He looked down at her and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Then they'll have to look again," he said, "because you're not a slave anymore. You're my daughter now." Her breath caught. Daughter. The word echoed inside her, heavy and beautiful. They walked toward the gate together. The guards looked up as they approached. One of them stepped forward and raised an eyebrow. "Back already, Thomas?" he said, then noticed the girl. "Who's this?" Thomas stood straight. "This is my daughter," he said clearly. "She'll be staying with me." The guard blinked, surprised. He looked at the girl, then at Thomas. "Is this a rescue?" Thomas nodded once. "She was in chains. I bought her freedom. She's mine now. In the way a father claims a child, not an owner claims property." The guard paused, then stepped aside. "Welcome home," he said quietly. The girl didn't speak, but her eyes were wide. Her heart raced as they entered the colony. No one threw things at her. No one shouted. No one spit. People stared. Yes, but with curiosity, not hate. Thomas led her to a small shelter near the back of the colony. It wasn't big, just a one-room place with a kitchen, a table, and 2 beds, but it was clean, warm, and it smelled like wood and old books. "This is home," he said, setting his bag down. The girl stood at the doorway, afraid to step inside. "I don't want to ruin it," she whispered. "You won't," he said gently. "This place needs your laughter, not your silence." She stepped in slowly, touching the walls like she expected them to disappear. He showed her where she would sleep, on a real bed with soft covers and a small lamp beside it. That night she didn't have a nightmare. In the morning, Thomas gave her a simple task. "Can you water the plants outside?" he asked. She nodded, unsure but did as he asked. As she poured water into the dry soil, a small boy passed by with his mother. The boy pointed and said, "Is that the girl Thomas saved?" The mother hushed him. "Don't stare," she said, but she didn't sound angry, just unsure. The girl looked down, ashamed. Thomas walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "They're just curious," he said. "They don't know your story, but they'll learn." Later that day, he sat her down at the table. He pulled out a worn box and opened it slowly. Inside were several old ID tags and nameplates. "I kept these from my unit," he said. "From the war, each one meant something." He handed her a blank tag. "This one is yours," he said. "You can choose a name now, any name you want." Her hands shook as she held the tag. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Thomas smiled. "No rush," he said. "When you're ready." That night after dinner, she stood beside the fire outside, looking at the stars again. Her hands touched the ID tag in her pocket, and for the first time she whispered a name. Not one given by slavers, not a number, but a name she had only heard once in a dream. She walked back into the house and found Thomas fixing the heater. "Can I say it now?" she asked. He turned and nodded. "Of course." She looked at him, her voice soft but strong. "My name is Lyra." Thomas smiled. "Then welcome home, Lyra." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't hide them this time. He pulled a blanket over her shoulders and said quietly, "I can't erase your past, but I promise you this, from now on you'll be safe, you'll be loved, and you will never be alone again." Lyra leaned against him, her heart slowly beginning to believe what her ears were hearing, and for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a thing. She felt like a daughter. Lyra had lived in the colony for 3 quiet weeks. Each day felt a little less heavy. Each morning started without fear, and each night ended with a warm bed and soft dreams. Thomas taught her simple things: how to clean tools, how to plant herbs, how to read a few human words. He never rushed her, never shouted, never pulled her by the arm. Every word from his mouth was soft, patient, kind, and slowly, the shadows in Lyra's eyes began to lift. She started talking to the neighbors. One woman gave her a hair ribbon. A boy her age shared a sweet snack one afternoon, and Thomas became more than just the man who rescued her. He became her home. But peace, as always, never lasted forever. It started with a ship, sleek, dark, and loud, landing outside the colony wall. The guards tensed, their weapons ready. Thomas stood at the edge of the gate, Lyra beside him, her hands gripped his coat tightly. She felt something cold and ugly stir in her chest. The ship's door hissed open, and 3 aliens stepped out, tall, armored, and cruel-eyed. They looked like the kind of men who bought and sold people, not goods. One of them stepped forward holding a glowing data slate. "We're here on business," he said. One of our registered property units has been stolen. ID number unit 23, Lyra. Froze. Her legs locked. Her breath stopped. Thomas stepped forward, his jaw tight. She is no one's property, he said firmly. She's my daughter now, the alien sneered. You humans, and your soft hearts. The girl was sold legally. Under system laws, we are here to retrieve her. Lyra couldn't breathe. Her heart pounded in her ears. She had known this day might come, but she hadn't expected the terror to return so quickly. Thomas raised his voice. She was bought, yes, but not to be owned. Only to be freed. One of the aliens stepped forward, with a smirk. You're interfering in trade laws. She still belongs to her master. The words felt like poison. Lyra stepped back, tears filling her eyes. She whispered, They're right, I'm still— No, Thomas said, turning sharply to her. His voice was fierce now, full of fire she had never seen before. You are not a slave, not to them, not to anyone. He turned back to the aliens. You can try to take her, he said, but you'll have to go through me first. The guards raised their weapons, but Thomas held up his hand. Let me handle this, he said calmly, then looked at the colony leader standing behind him. Is there law here, or do we follow fear? The leader, an older man with tired eyes, hesitated, then said, We follow freedom here, and the girl stays. The alien leader growled, You will regret this, human. No, Thomas said, stepping in front of Lyra. I regret nothing. The aliens returned to their ship, but not before turning back one last time. She's marked, one said. She'll always be hunted, always be owned, no matter what name you give her. The ship lifted off with a roar, dust flying through the air, but the damage had already been done. Lyra sat alone that night, away from the fire, away from the warmth. Her hands were wrapped around her knees, her eyes locked on the scars that still showed on her wrists. Thomas came and sat beside her, saying nothing for a long while. Finally, she whispered, They're right, I'm still marked, I'll always be chased. Thomas shook his head. You're not what they say. You're not what they made you. But they'll keep coming, she said. What if next time they take me? What if I bring danger to this place? He didn't lie. He didn't promise safety he couldn't give. But he looked her in the eyes and said, Even if they come 1,000 times, I'll fight for you every single time. Lyra looked at him, tears rolling down her cheeks. Why? Because you are my daughter, he said, and no one takes my daughter away. She leaned into him, and for the first time since the ship landed, she let herself cry, not from fear, but from knowing someone would protect her. Even if the past returned, again and again, she would not face it alone. Weeks passed since the dark ship left, but its shadow still followed Lyra. Even though the alien men were gone, their words still echoed in her mind. She's marked. She'll always be owned. At night, she would wake with her hands gripping the blanket too tight. Her breath would shake, and her eyes would search the dark corners of the room for chains that were no longer there. But every time Thomas was there, sometimes sitting quietly beside the fire, sometimes just watching the stars through the window. And when she looked at him, something inside her would calm down again. One morning she found him working near the garden. His hands were dirty with soil, planting small green seeds in the ground. She walked up slowly and watched him work. Why do you keep planting? She asked. What if they don't grow? Thomas smiled, brushing the dirt off his palms. Because maybe they will, he said. Hope needs space, just like seeds. Lyra sat beside him, pulling her knees close. I don't know how to stop being afraid, she whispered. Every day, I feel like someone is going to come take me again. He nodded. I know, he said softly. And that's okay. Fear is not weakness. It means you've survived something cruel. She looked at the earth, thinking, but I want to be more than someone who's afraid. Thomas stood and held out a small spade to her. Then let's start with this, he said. She took the tool slowly and dug the dirt next to him, planting her first seed. It was a simple moment, but it felt powerful. Later that day, Thomas took her to the center of the colony. The small crowd had gathered, men, women, and children, who had watched Lyra from a distance for weeks. Some had nodded at her before, some had offered quiet smiles, but most had said nothing. Thomas stepped forward, clearing his throat. There's something I want to say, he began. This girl, Lyra, is no longer a guest here. Lyra stood behind him, her heart racing. She is my daughter now, he said loudly. By choice, not by blood. She may have come here scared and silent, but she stayed with courage. She has worked, helped, learned, and grown. The colony leader stepped forward, holding something wrapped in cloth. We talked about it, he said, and we agree. He opened the cloth and revealed a fresh identification tag, engraved with her new name. Lyra Thomas. Lyra stared at it. Her hands trembled as the leader placed it around her neck. From today on, the leader said, this colony recognizes her not as a rescued slave, not as a stranger, but as one of us. The crowd clapped quietly. A few people stepped forward to shake her hand. One woman offered a basket of bread. A child gave her a hand-drawn picture. Lyra couldn't speak. Her chest was too full. Her eyes flooded with tears. But this time, she didn't try to stop them. That night, back at the small house, she sat at the table while Thomas prepared dinner. Do you feel different? He asked, smiling over his shoulder. She nodded, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. I feel like I exist now. Thomas sat down and passed her a plate. You always existed, he said. They just tried to erase you. They ate together in peace. No fear at the door, no chains in the corner. After dinner, Lyra sat by the window and looked up at the stars. Her fingers touched the tag around her neck. Her name, her real name, she whispered softly. I am Lyra Thomas. The stars above seemed to glow warmer, like they were listening. As she got ready for bed, Thomas tucked the blanket over her gently. You've come a long way, he said, and there's still more to go. She looked up at him, her eyes steady. Will you stay with me? Always, he said. I gave you my word. She smiled, a full, soft smile that had never touched her face before, and as she closed her eyes, the world outside the house stayed silent, but inside her heart, something loud and beautiful bloomed. She was not a thing, not a number, not a shadow. She was a daughter, a loved one, a name written in the stars.